The crowded hall fell silent for a heartbeat, and then with a voice sharp as broken glass, the host leaned over the polished counter, whispering in a tone so cruel it carried across the room. "You don't belong here." Nia froze. The words felt like ice spreading through her chest, chilling every pulse. She had walked into this upscale event, a small envelope clutched in her trembling hands, carrying a plea for help that should have been met with compassion. Instead, she found herself on display, her every flaw magnified, her poverty highlighted against the sparkling gowns and tailored suits surrounding her. The host's sneer widened as if savoring the sight of her fear. "Honestly," he added, louder this time, forcing the words into the ears of everyone within reach, "I don't know why someone like you is even here. People like you," he waved a dismissive hand at her dress, threadbare and modest, "don't belong in places like this." Nia's heart pounded. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, piercing through her like arrows. Some were curious, some disgusted, and a few, she hoped, sympathetic, though no one moved. A man near the buffet whispered into his phone, clearly recording the scene. Others murmured quietly among themselves, their eyes darting between Nia and the host, unsure whether to intervene or enjoy the spectacle. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her quivering lips. I I just need a moment of your time," she said, her voice shaking but carrying the honesty of someone with no other options. "It won't take long, please." The host laughed, a harsh, grating sound that seemed to echo off the marble walls. "A moment, sweetheart, that's all you need. Let me guess," he said, stepping closer, making sure the crowd could hear. "You want some charity, some handout, maybe a free meal? Isn't that what people like you come here for?" Heat rose to Nia's cheeks, not from shame, but from indignation. Her hands clenched the edges of the envelope as if it were a lifeline. "No, it's not that. I just need." "Exactly what?" the host sneered, cutting her off mid-sentence. "A favor from me. You have no idea who I am or who owns this place, and frankly, I don't care." His tone grew louder, designed to humiliate. "Look at you. You're trembling, stuttering, completely out of place, and yet here you are, pretending you deserve." "What exactly?" A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, some whispered, but no one stepped forward. The silence was deafening, a spotlight on her isolation. Her palms were sweaty, her knees weak, but she stood firm, knowing that if she faltered, the humiliation would stretch even longer, like a shadow with no end. The host leaned in closer, letting the venom in his words drip slowly. "You think you're like us, that you have a right to be here. People like you, poor, desperate, unsure, should know their place. And guess what? This place isn't it." Nia blinked rapidly, holding back tears. Her voice wavered, fragile yet defiant. "I'm just trying to save someone I love, that's all. I didn't mean I didn't know." The host waved her off with a sharp gesture. "Excuses, that's all you have, and don't think the owner or anyone important would care. They'd probably laugh at you too." His smirk widened, savoring every second of her discomfort. Then a chilling hush fell over the room. Nia's eyes flicked across the crowd and caught sight of a man standing near the back. He was quiet, almost hidden among the other guests, yet there was something different about him, something commanding. His eyes, intense and unwavering, seemed to pierce the chaos, settling directly on Nia. Her pulse stuttered. She didn't know him, had never seen him before, but in that gaze was a truth the host could not see, a truth that could shift everything in a single heartbeat. She didn't yet understand how, but instinct told her. This stranger was about to change the rules of the game. The host, oblivious to the silent observer, continued his tirade, growing bolder as the crowd's discomfort deepened. "Honestly, I don't even know why I'm humoring you. You should just leave. Go back to where you came from. We don't need this," he said, gesturing vaguely at her. "Here." Nia's fingers clenched the envelope so tightly that it crumpled slightly. The words cut through her like knives, but beneath the shame, a spark of courage ignited. She took a shaky breath, refusing to let her fear dictate her fate. She would speak. She had to. And then the unexpected. From the corner of the room, a soft, almost imperceptible murmur began. It wasn't the crowd reacting, it was something else. A tension, a presence, a silent warning that rippled through the air like electricity before a storm. The stranger in the back, the one who had been watching, shifted forward slightly, and Nia felt it. Someone powerful, someone who knew the truth, someone who could turn humiliation into vindication in an instant. But who? And what would happen if this person finally stepped forward? Nia's trembling hands, the quivering lips, the crowd's mixed expressions, and finally, lingering on the host's smug, unknowing face. The tension is unbearable. And then, just as the host leans closer to deliver the final, cruel jab, a voice in the background, calm yet commanding, whispers, "Stop!" The room goes completely silent. Heads turn, eyes widen. The host freezes mid-sentence, confusion and irritation flickering across his face. Nia's heart races. Could this be the moment everything changes? Before the identity of the mysterious voice can be revealed, the story pauses. The audience is left in breathless anticipation. And now, let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The first light of dawn filtered through the cracked windowpane of Nia's small apartment, painting the peeling walls in soft shades of gold. She stirred beneath the thin blanket, her body aching from another night spent in a bed far too small for a soul as restless as hers. The city outside was already alive, cars honking, children laughing, the distant hum of street vendors preparing for another day. But inside her tiny apartment, silence lingered like a fragile shield, holding back the chaos that seemed to follow her everywhere. Nia, 23 years old, was already awake before the alarm clock even had the chance to sound. Her dark skin glowed faintly in the morning light, and her eyes, wide and alert, carried a depth of strength that belied her youth. She was small but resilient, her movements purposeful as she swung her legs over the side of the bed and planted her bare feet on the cold wooden floor. Each morning was a quiet ritual, a battle to rise and face a world that rarely gave her mercy, yet she did it with dignity and grace. She padded softly across the apartment to the kitchenette, careful not to wake her younger brother, Malik, who was curled up on the couch, still clutching his worn-out stuffed rabbit. The air smelled faintly of yesterday's cooking, a mix of beans and fried bread that had been left to cool overnight. Nia rinsed a small cup and filled it with water from the tap, taking a slow sip as she surveyed her surroundings. The apartment was modest, 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchenette squeezed into a corner, but it was home. On the walls, a few faded photographs captured moments of joy, Nia as a child, laughing with her mother, the only parent she remembered fully. Her father had left years ago, leaving her mother to fight a battle that would end too soon. Now it was Nia's turn to carry the weight of her family, and she did so with quiet determination. Her younger brother stirred, murmuring something in his sleep. She knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Morning, little man," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "Time to get ready." Malik blinked slowly, rubbing his eyes, and managed a small smile. His trust in her was absolute, and she cherished it. He was the light in her days of darkness, the reminder that she wasn't alone even when the world seemed to have abandoned her. The next task was the most urgent. Nia retrieved a small, tattered envelope from the worn-out drawer beneath the kitchenette counter. Inside were bills, notices, and reminders, all pressing demands from a world that didn't wait for people like her. Her mother's medicine was running low, a fact that made her stomach tighten with worry. The note from the pharmacy had been tucked into the envelope. Insufficient funds, payment required. The words stabbed her, a daily reminder of the cruel reality she navigated. Despite the hardship, Nia moved with grace. She made breakfast for Malik, a simple meal of porridge with a pinch of sugar and a splash of milk, balancing care with efficiency. She never complained about what little they had. Instead, she focused on small joys. The way Malik's eyes lit up at the first spoonful, the warmth of sunlight spilling across the floor, the fleeting moments of laughter they managed to steal from the day. By the time Malik was ready for school, dressed in the one good uniform they owned, Nia had prepared a small bag of lunch, a neatly wrapped sandwich, and a bottle of water. She kissed his forehead, whispering words of encouragement. "Stay safe, work hard, and remember, you are brave, even when it's hard to see." Malik grinned, clutched her hand, and ran toward the bus stop, his small figure disappearing among the bustling streets. With the apartment finally quiet, Nia's attention turned to herself. She had dreams, ones that often felt too big for the walls that surrounded her. She wanted to study, to create a life beyond the constraints of poverty. She wanted to be able to provide for her family without fear gnawing at her every waking moment. And most of all, she wanted to be seen, not for her struggles, but for her heart, her determination, and the quiet courage that carried her through each day. Nia's morning routine wasn't glamorous. She dressed in a modest dress that had seen better days, patched in places her mother's hands once mended with love. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun, her face clean but bare, revealing the natural beauty that the world often overlooked. She checked the envelope once more, ensuring the papers were in order, and then tucked it safely into her bag. Today was important. Today was one of those rare days when hope outweighed fear. As she stepped out into the street, the city greeted her with its usual chaos. Vendors called out their wares, children played in the alleys, and the distant hum of traffic created a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Every step was a negotiation between fear and necessity. She moved with awareness, conscious of the eyes that might judge her, the hands that might turn her away, and the doors that might remain closed. Yet within her there was an unshakable resolve. She refused to let the day's challenges define her. Nia's neighborhood was a tapestry of life and struggle, a place where neighbors leaned on each other out of necessity. She passed the corner store, greeting Mr. Jacobs, an elderly man who had watched her grow from a curious child into a determined young woman. "Morning, Nia," he called. "Big day?" She smiled faintly, appreciating the kindness in his eyes. "Morning, Mr. Jacobs. Yeah, big day." He nodded knowingly, as if he understood the unspoken weight she carried. "Just remember, kiddo, even the smallest steps can take you far. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her heart lifted slightly at his words. They were simple, ordinary, but to Nia they were a reminder of the goodness that still existed, even in a world that often tried to strip it away. She continued down the street, weaving through the crowd with practiced grace, her mind focused on the task ahead. For Nia, this morning was more than a routine. It was a culmination of years of quiet perseverance. She had faced rejection, judgment, and countless closed doors, yet she woke each day with a steadfast determination to keep moving forward. Her dignity was intact, her heart was strong, and her spirit, though tested, remained unbroken. And as she approached the edge of her neighborhood, where the modest streets gave way to the glimmering high rises of the city's wealthier districts, she felt that familiar mixture of fear and hope. Today, everything could change, or everything could remain the same. But she had made a promise to herself, a vow that no matter the outcome, she would not allow despair to claim her. In that moment, the city seemed both daunting and full of possibility. The envelope in her bag, the carefully rehearsed words in her mind, and the determination in her heart were all that she carried as she prepared to step into a world that often judged her before she even spoke. She was Nia, a daughter, a sister, a fighter, and despite everything, she would face the day with courage. Little did she know, the events that would unfold in the hours to come would test her in ways she could never have imagined. A day that began with quiet hope would soon erupt into chaos, humiliation, and revelation. But for now, in the golden morning light, Nia walked with her head held high, unaware that the life-changing confrontation was just around the corner. Nia's footsteps echoed against the cracked pavement as she made her way toward the bus stop, but her mind was elsewhere, locked in a cycle of worry and fear that refused to let her breathe. Every step seemed heavier than the last, as if the weight of the world pressed down on her shoulders. The envelope in her bag throbbed with significance. Inside were the bills and notices, yes, but also one crucial thing, a single prescription, the last hope for her mother's survival. Her mother, Marlene, had been battling a chronic illness for years. Once vibrant, full of laughter and warmth, her body had slowly betrayed her, leaving Nia to pick up the pieces. There was no insurance, no safety net, just 2 daughters and a son, and the relentless climb of medical bills that never seemed to end. Today, the pharmacy had called. The supply of her mother's life-saving medication was about to run out, and without it, the consequences were catastrophic. Nia's chest tightened as she replayed the conversation in her head. "We can't give it to her without full payment," the pharmacist had said gently but firmly. Nia had asked every possible way, offered to pay in installments, begged for assistance programs. Every avenue had led to the same dead end. The numbers didn't lie, she had no money. Not enough for rent, not enough for food, and certainly not enough for the medication that kept her mother alive. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away fiercely. She could not afford to break down, not now. Her family depended on her. Her younger siblings, Malik and their baby cousin, who had recently moved in after the loss of his parents, relied on her determination, her resourcefulness, her unwavering commitment to keeping them safe. She could not fail them, even if it meant walking into the most intimidating, hostile place she had ever faced. The problem was clear, brutal, and inescapable. Nia needed money. Not a little money, not a vague promise of help, real, immediate, tangible funds that would allow her to buy the medicine, pay the rent, and ensure her family survived the coming week. She had no relatives she could call, no friends with financial stability, no social safety net. Every familiar door had been closed to her, and yet she had one option left. It was a risk, a frightening, humbling, nearly impossible risk. She had heard stories of the wealthy ignoring people like her, of being dismissed, laughed at, or worse, humiliated in public. But she had exhausted every alternative. Desperation clawed at her, sharp and relentless, pushing her forward. She could feel it pressing against her chest, a force as real and heavy as gravity itself. The thought of humiliation made her stomach churn. She pictured the gleaming marble floors, the impeccably dressed staff, the intimidating aura of wealth and authority. Her modest dress, her worn shoes, the tattered bag containing nothing but a plea and a prescription. All of it marked her as an outsider, someone the world would mock before even listening. But the alternative was far worse. Inaction could mean her mother's life, her family's security, all slipping through her fingers. She paused on the corner, staring at the building she had never entered before, a luxury establishment that seemed designed to intimidate anyone who didn't belong. Its towering glass doors reflected her own worried face, and for a moment Nia considered turning away. What if they laughed at her? What if she was shunned, publicly humiliated, sent back into the world with nothing? The thought made her knees shake, her chest tight with anxiety. But then she thought of her mother's frail smile when she had woken that morning, the soft but pleading voice asking if Nia had brought her any news. She thought of Malik, of the baby cousin's innocent eyes, and of the little rituals they clung to like morning porridge and bedtime stories that kept their family tethered together in a world that often seemed determined to break them. And in that instant, fear transformed into determination. Nia straightened her back, tightened her grip on the bag, and whispered to herself, "I have to try. I have no other choice." Her voice was barely audible, yet it carried a resolve that surprised even her. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who depended on her, for the fragile thread of hope that kept them moving forward in a world that rarely cared. The urgency of the situation was like a drumbeat in her chest. Every second she delayed brought her closer to the precipice of disaster. The pharmacy would close, the medicine would run out, the rent would remain unpaid, and the mounting pressure of survival could crush her entire family. Each passing minute sharpened the edge of her desperation, making her feel both powerless and fiercely alive. As she approached the building's entrance, the reality of the environment struck her. The lobby gleamed with polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and an air of cold sophistication that seemed designed to intimidate. Staff in crisp uniforms moved with practiced efficiency, their polite smiles never reaching their eyes. The wealthy patrons, absorbed in their own affairs, glanced at her with mild curiosity, or perhaps amusement, barely noticing her presence but already judging. Nia's mind raced. She had rehearsed her words over and over in her head, each version more precise than the last. She had practiced how to speak respectfully, how to plead without begging, how to maintain dignity while asking for help. And yet, standing before the imposing doors, she felt the familiar knot of fear tighten in her stomach. The risk of rejection, of being ridiculed, loomed large, but desperation left no room for hesitation. She inhaled deeply, drawing in courage with each shaky breath, and pressed forward. Every step toward the entrance felt like a lifetime, a physical manifestation of the emotional journey she had already endured. She was stepping into a world that did not welcome her, that would see her poverty before her need, and that could humiliate her at any moment. Yet she moved forward anyway. Nia's thoughts flashed briefly to the people she loved, to the stakes she could not ignore, to the urgency that left her with no choice but to act. Her heart thumped in her chest, a rhythm equal parts fear and hope. She had no idea what awaited her inside, no certainty that her request would be met with anything but disdain. Yet she could not turn back. Not now, not when everything depended on her courage. With a final glance at the street behind her, the familiar sights of her neighborhood, the faces of the people she cherished, the fragile threads of hope that had carried her this far, she stepped up to the doors. The polished handles gleamed under her fingers, cool and indifferent, reflecting the anxiety and determination in her eyes. She paused just for a heartbeat, allowing herself to summon every ounce of courage, every shard of resilience she had ever known. And then she pushed the doors open. The world inside was cold, intimidating, and brilliantly unwelcoming. Every eye turned toward her, and in that instant the delicate balance of fear and hope teetered on the edge. Nia had crossed the threshold, and now there was no turning back. She was about to confront a judgment harsher than she had ever known, a prejudice that would seek to crush her dignity before she could even speak. But she held her head high. Her family depended on her. Her mother's life depended on her. And despite everything, Nia refused to be invisible. Today, she would face the storm, whatever it took. Nia stepped onto the bustling city streets, the early morning sun reflecting off the glass facades of towering buildings. The neighborhood she had left behind was fading in the distance, replaced by streets lined with expensive boutiques, sleek cars, and people whose lives seemed entirely separate from her own. Every step forward reminded her of the invisible divide between her world and theirs, a chasm carved by money, status, and a sense of entitlement she had never known. Her bag felt heavier with each block, though its contents hadn't changed. Inside lay her plea folded neatly, the prescription for her mother's medicine, the few remaining bills she could not ignore, and a fragile hope that someone, anyone, would see her humanity rather than her poverty. Nia's fingers brushed the strap of the bag, seeking comfort in the tangible weight of her responsibility. It was more than a bag, it was the lifeline of her family. As she walked, anxiety gnawed at her. Every reflection in the windows, every pair of glancing eyes felt like a judgment. She imagined the whispers behind her back. She doesn't belong here. Who does she think she is? She tried to focus on the task ahead, repeating the lines she had rehearsed, imagining the polite and measured tone she would use to plead her case. But the closer she got, the more her voice inside trembled. A sleek black car rolled past, its tinted windows obscuring the driver, but Nia could feel the scrutiny of wealth pressing down on her. People in tailored suits brushed by her without acknowledgement, their hurried lives contrasting with her careful, deliberate steps. She felt exposed, a fragile figure in a world that moved with precision and indifference. Fear whispered in her ear, maybe you made a mistake. Maybe this isn't the place for you. Maybe you'll be humiliated. Yet alongside fear, there was a stubborn ember of hope. She pictured her mother's frail smile, the way her little brother's eyes sparkled with trust and love, the quiet courage she had summoned every morning for as long as she could remember. That ember, though small, pushed her forward one step at a time. She had no other choice. She could not return home without trying. The city seemed alive with contrasts. On one side were the lavish cafes where breakfast plates gleamed with fresh fruit and golden pastries. On the other, corners of the street where trash overflowed from dumpsters, stray dogs scavenging for scraps. Nia moved between these worlds, a silent observer of wealth and struggle coexisting in uneasy proximity. She felt both invisible and painfully visible, caught between the fear of being dismissed and the necessity of being heard. Her thoughts wandered to what awaited her inside the building. She had heard stories of the kind of arrogance she would face. Hosts and employees who judged before listening, wealthy patrons who saw humility as weakness and public humiliation as entertainment. She tried to steel herself, imagining the polite, calm tone she would use, the respectful bow, the careful words she had memorized. Stay calm, stay dignified, don't let them see fear, don't let them see desperation. Even as she rehearsed, a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. What if they laughed? What if they pushed her away, ridiculed her in front of everyone? She remembered the look of disdain in the eyes of those who had already turned her away in her life, landlords, clerks, strangers in line at the grocery store, and shuddered. But she could not stop now. Every second of hesitation brought her closer to losing everything. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the street, pulling her hair across her face. She paused for a moment, steadying herself against the edge of a building. The city was indifferent to her struggle. Horns honked, vendors shouted, and the footsteps of hurried strangers created a rhythm that seemed to mock her own cautious pace. And yet she drew strength from the knowledge that she was moving forward, not backward. Every step was an act of courage, a refusal to let fear dictate her fate. The final stretch to the building was the hardest. Towering glass doors reflected Nia's anxious expression, framing her in the cold, elegant architecture. She noticed the doorman, impeccably dressed, standing with an air of detached authority. His eyes flicked over her briefly, registering her modest dress and worn shoes before returning to his polished posture. The subtle judgment in that glance sent a shiver down her spine, but she refused to retreat. She inhaled deeply, centering herself. The bag in her hands was a tangible reminder of why she had come. Inside were not just bills and a prescription, but the lives of the people she loved. Every beat of her heart, every step she took, carried the weight of responsibility. She repeated a silent mantra, for my mother, for Malik, for everyone who depends on me. I cannot fail. Nia's reflection in the glass doors showed a figure small in stature but upright in spirit. She could see the trembling of her hands, the subtle tightness in her jaw, the anxious flicker in her eyes. And yet beneath the surface there was something unshakable, a dignity that refused to bow, a courage that refused to crumble, a hope that refused to die. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cold brass handle. The surface was smooth, unyielding, indifferent. Behind it lay the world she had feared, the environment where judgment and prejudice would seek to crush her. She could almost hear the whispers she imagined already waiting inside. You don't belong here. Go back where you came from. And yet she pressed forward. With a final breath, she pushed the doors open. The cool air of the lobby greeted her, mingling with the subtle scent of luxury, polished wood, fresh flowers, faint perfume. Her eyes swept over the room, taking in the polished marble floors, the towering chandeliers, the sharply dressed staff moving with practiced efficiency. Patrons paused momentarily, some with curiosity, others with polite indifference. And somewhere amid the crowd, she felt it, a gaze that seemed to pierce through the room, unknown but familiar in its intensity. Nia stepped fully inside, her heart hammering. The doors closed behind her, and with that final sound, there was no turning back. Every ounce of her courage, every fragment of hope, every prayer she had whispered to herself on the way here converged into a single moment of truth. She had arrived. The confrontation was waiting, and somewhere in the crowd, unseen but inevitable, the first stirrings of a life-changing force were beginning to move. The lobby's polished marble floors reflected the morning light, but Nia hardly noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the figure at the far end, a tall, sharply dressed man standing behind a sleek counter, his posture radiating authority and disdain. The host. She had rehearsed every line in her head, every possible way to ask for help with dignity and humility, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer force of his presence. The moment she stepped forward, he noticed her. His gaze lingered just long enough for her heart to seize, sharp and cold. Then he smirked, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Well, well," he said, his voice loud enough to carry across the lobby. "Look at this. A little visitor." He emphasized the last word with a slow, deliberate drawl, making sure the few patrons nearby caught the intended insult. Nia's fingers tightened on the strap of her bag, her knuckles whitening. She swallowed, steadying herself. "Excuse me," she said softly but firmly. I need help. My mother, she needs medicine. I don't have the means." "Ah, there it is," the host interrupted, cutting her off with a hand gesture that dismissed her completely. "The poor girl asking for handouts. Isn't this precious?" He chuckled, loud and cruel, ensuring the crowd could hear. "You really thought you could walk in here dressed like that, carrying your little envelope and expect sympathy? How quaint." A few people in the lobby whispered to each other, glancing at Nia with curiosity, some with judgment, most with quiet amusement. No one stepped forward. No one offered a word of support. The silence pressed down on her like a physical weight. Nia's voice trembled, but she refused to falter. "I'm not asking for charity," she said, her words gaining strength. "I'm asking for help. My mother, if she doesn't get her medicine, she could die. Please." The host laughed again, a sound that grated against the nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Die, oh honey, please. Don't you think people pay for these things? There's a system, there are rules, and guess what? You don't fit in that system. You can't pay, so you don't belong. Simple as that." Nia felt a flash of anger rise alongside the fear. How dare he reduce her mother's life and all her family's struggles to some convenient excuse for mockery? She gritted her teeth, trying to hold back tears. "I'm not asking to belong," she said quietly but with unmistakable dignity. "I'm asking for compassion." The host's smirk widened. He leaned slightly closer, ensuring that every word landed like a blow. "Compassion," he repeated as if tasting the word on his tongue. "Sweetheart, let me be honest. Compassion isn't handed out to people like you, poor, trembling, desperate, are for entertainment, not assistance. Look at you, quivering in front of everyone. Pathetic, really." Heat rose to Nia's cheeks, not from shame, but from righteous indignation. She pressed her lips together, refusing to break down, though the sting of humiliation threatened to swallow her whole. Around her, the crowd remained still, their silence more hurtful than the host's words. A few phones emerged from pockets, recording the scene. Someone whispered, "She's going to cry." As if predicting the inevitable, Nia drew in a shaky breath, her eyes scanning the lobby for anything, any glimmer of kindness, but found none. Her sense of isolation was suffocating. She had always known that life could be cruel, but she had never imagined being made to feel so small, so utterly invisible in a room full of people. The host, sensing her wavering resolve, pushed further. "Look at your shoes," he said, pointing down with a precise, cutting motion. "Scuffed, dirty. How daring of you to think you could step into this place without anyone noticing. Honestly, it's almost charming, almost." He leaned back, letting the sarcasm hang heavy in the air. "But charm only gets you so far. You're not charming, you're desperate. And desperation, that's my favorite kind of entertainment." Nia's hands shook as she clutched her bag, holding onto her dignity with everything she had. She felt the sting of tears, the raw ache of humiliation pressing against her chest. "Please." I don't have much time. My mother, she needs this medicine. Time? He interrupted again, raising his voice so it cut through the murmur of the crowd. You think time matters to me, to us? No, time matters to people who pay for it, not little girls who think crying and pleading is a valid strategy. Honestly. His eyes flicked toward the audience, inviting them to revel in her discomfort. Some people really do have a knack for making fools of themselves. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of whispers, sideways glances, and suppressed laughter. No one stepped forward. Their silence screamed louder than the host's cruelty ever could, confirming for Nia that she truly stood alone. Every instinct told her to run, to flee, and escape the judgment and derision. But she didn't, because giving up now would mean more than her pride. It would mean giving up her mother. It would mean letting fear dictate the life of everyone she loved. And though her knees threatened to buckle beneath her, she planted her feet firmly on the marble floor and tried again. My mother is sick, she said, her voice small but unwavering. She could die without this medicine. Please, I'm asking for help, not for a handout, for life. The host laughed again, louder this time, a sharp, mocking bark that echoed across the lobby. Life? You think you can bargain with life, with me? You, look at yourself, you're nothing. And yet here you are, daring to enter a place that will never accept you. You're entertaining all right, but not in the way you hope. The words landed like blows, each one designed to crush her dignity, each one amplified by the stunned silence of the crowd. Nia felt her eyes burn. Her chest heaved as she struggled to maintain composure. Apologies whispered from her lips, unprompted, even though she had done nothing wrong. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother anyone, I just need. Sorry. The host cut her off, eyebrows raised in condescending disbelief. Sorry? Don't be sorry for asking. Be sorry you were born thinking this place could ever welcome you. That's the only thing you should be sorry for. For a brief, unbearable moment, Nia felt the full weight of despair. She was trapped, publicly humiliated, and utterly alone. The walls of her courage trembled under the relentless onslaught of judgment, the sneers of the host, and the indifferent silence of the bystanders. She considered turning and fleeing, retreating into the comfort of anonymity and safety. She felt utterly defeated, as though the universe itself had conspired to remind her that she was small, powerless, and invisible. And yet somewhere in the back of the room, amid the whispers and shuffles of the crowd, a presence shifted. Nia didn't know who it was, but she felt it, a quiet force, calm and composed, watching, waiting. She dared to glance toward it, her chest aching with exhaustion and faint hope. The presence was unassuming yet commanding, a stark contrast to the host's arrogance and cruelty. For the first time since stepping into the lobby, Nia felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in hours. The possibility that the tide could turn, that the scales might tip, that someone, some powerful someone, might finally intervene. But she could not yet see the face behind it. And so, with the host's cruel gaze still fixed upon her, the crowd's silence pressing like stone, and her mother's life hanging in the balance, Nia stood, trembling but defiant, on the precipice of humiliation and the unknown. The words had stopped hitting Nia's ears, but their impact lingered, embedding themselves deep into her chest. Each insult, each cruel laugh, each dismissive gesture from the host echoed in her mind like a relentless drumbeat. Her shoulders slumped slightly, as if the invisible weight of the crowd pressed her down to the marble floor. She was exhausted, raw, and painfully exposed, not just in body but in spirit. Her eyes darted across the lobby. The onlookers had not moved. Some whispered, some pointed their phones toward her, some looked away entirely, as though her humiliation was entertainment rather than an injustice. None intervened. None offered a single word of comfort or support. The silence was more suffocating than the host's insults, heavier than any blow, sharper than any sarcasm. It felt as if she were standing in a vacuum where only her vulnerability existed. Nia pressed her hands against her temples, fighting back tears. The edges of her vision blurred, but she refused to fall to her knees. Not yet, not here, not when giving up now could cost her mother's life. Her breaths came in short, uneven gasps. I can't do this. I can't. The thought whispered in her mind, a fragile thread threatening to snap under the pressure of the moment. The host, sensing her faltering, smirked and leaned forward once more. What's the matter? He asked, voice dripping with mockery. Can't handle the truth? Can't handle a world that doesn't bend to your desires? His words were cold and calculated, meant to make her shrink, to remind her that she was powerless here, that she had no place among the polished floors and wealthed walls. Nia swallowed hard, trying to summon a flicker of defiance, but her chest ached and her throat felt raw. I'm just trying to... Her voice broke and she choked back a sob. I just want to save my mother. The host laughed again, a harsh, cruel sound that rang off the walls. "Your mother," he repeated, shaking his head slowly, savoring the moment. "Oh, honey, you really think that story makes you special, makes you worthy of respect? I've seen hundreds like you." Begging, pleading, trembling, thinking they deserve attention. And you know what? You're exactly like them, weak, pathetic, invisible. The words cut deeper than any physical blow. Nia felt the room tilt slightly, her vision narrowing to the host's smirking face. The weight of despair pressed down like a boulder, and for a moment she imagined turning and fleeing. She could disappear into the streets outside, vanish into the anonymity of the city, and escape the laughter, the judgment, the crushing weight of shame. But even in that fleeting thought, guilt clawed at her chest. Her mother, her brother, the baby cousin who depended on her every day, she could not abandon them, no matter how unbearable the moment felt. Tears spilled freely now, slipping silently down her cheeks. She wiped them with the back of her hand, but they returned, relentless, as though the universe itself demanded she feel the depth of her vulnerability. The host's eyes flicked to her, his amusement intensifying at the visible collapse. "Ah, there it is," he said softly, almost tenderly, mocking her fragility. "The tears, that's what people like you are made of, nothing but tears and apologies. Look at you, apologizing for existing in a world that doesn't want you." Nia's hands shook uncontrollably. Her words failed her. She opened her mouth, trying to speak, but only a whimper escaped. The crowd's silence echoed around her, a cruel accomplice to the host's cruelty. She felt utterly alone, abandoned in the midst of strangers who chose observation over action. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to run and hide, to escape the unbearable humiliation. Her knees buckled slightly as her strength wavered. For the first time in her life, Nia truly felt powerless. She had faced hardship, poverty, and struggle, but none of it had prepared her for this, the exposure of her soul in a room that seemed determined to strip her of dignity. I, she whispered, faltering under the weight of emotion. The words were hollow, meaningless in the face of ridicule. Apologies spilled from her lips, though they were undeserved. I'm sorry for bothering anyone, I just... Stop!" The command cut through the murmur of the lobby, sharp and unexpected. Nia froze mid-apology, blinking in disbelief. All eyes shifted slightly, as if someone or something had shifted the air itself. The host's confident smirk faltered for a split second, replaced by curiosity, then irritation. "What was that?" he demanded. Nia's heart skipped a beat. She glanced toward the source of the voice, though her vision blurred with tears. At the edge of the lobby, a figure had moved forward. Calm, composed, and radiating an aura of authority, they stood quietly, their gaze settling on her with something she hadn't felt in hours: recognition, respect, and quiet power. The room seemed to still around them. The laughter of the host faltered. The crowd's whispers grew nervous, and in that pause, Nia realized something remarkable. She was no longer completely alone. For a heartbeat, the weight on her chest lifted slightly. Though she was trembling, exhausted, and humiliated, a spark of hope flickered. The presence at the edge of the room seemed to promise that the tide could turn, that perhaps justice was not entirely absent from this world. But the moment was fleeting. The host, oblivious to the significance of the newcomer, shook his head and waved dismissively. "Oh, now you want to play hero?" he sneered. "Do you know what you're stepping into? Because clearly these people," he gestured at Nia, "don't belong in this world, and you, well, you're just another fool trying to interfere." Nia's body shook with exhaustion, humiliation, and fear. She wanted to collapse, she wanted to vanish, but she didn't. Something deep inside, a quiet ember of resilience that had carried her from dawn until now, refused to die. The presence at the edge of the room, the calm, unwavering authority, was enough to remind her that even in this moment of utter despair, she was not powerless. Her chest heaved, her knees weak, her hands trembling, but she straightened. She looked toward the figure whose quiet power seemed to shift the room. Even though the host continued his tirade, even though the crowd remained silent in the face of her suffering, Nia felt something she hadn't felt in hours. The possibility that she could be heard, seen, and defended. For the first time since entering the lobby, she allowed herself to breathe, not fully, not yet, but enough to know that the lowest point of despair could be survived, even when words failed her, even when silence surrounded her, even when humiliation seemed total. Somehow, against all odds, Nia remained standing. And though the storm had not passed, she felt the first flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the tide was about to turn. The murmurs in the lobby had grown quieter, replaced by the heavy, palpable tension that lingered after the host's relentless cruelty. Nia's shoulders were trembling, her chest heaving, tears still streaking down her cheeks, yet she remained rooted to the marble floor. The weight of humiliation had not lifted, but in the corner of her vision, movement began, a subtle, measured step that seemed almost impossibly calm in contrast to the chaos of the moment. The figure emerged from the crowd, slow, deliberate, radiating an authority that did not rely on arrogance. Every eye in the lobby shifted, drawn to them, yet the newcomer did not rush, did not shout. Instead, they walked with the kind of poise that demanded attention without seeking it, a quiet command that made even the host pause mid-smirk. Nia glanced up, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her exhausted senses. She could feel it before she could see it, a presence so solid, so dignified, that it seemed to create a bubble of calm around her. She noticed the way the person's eyes, soft yet piercing, settled on her. There was recognition there, a sense that someone truly saw her for the first time in hours and perhaps in her life. The host noticed the attention shift and frowned. "And who?" he began, but his words faltered as the newcomer approached, each step deliberate, each movement measured. Their calm energy was magnetic, a contrast to the host's sharp, exaggerated gestures. The lobby, once filled with whispers and quiet amusement, now held its collective breath. Finally, the newcomer reached the center of the room. Their gaze, unwavering, found the host. "Excuse me," they said, their voice calm but firm, carrying easily over the murmurs of the crowd. "This ends now." The host blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Excuse me, who do you think you are?" he asked, voice sharp but tinged with uncertainty. He straightened, trying to regain dominance, but the newcomer's presence was like a tide, pushing back the arrogance that had ruled the lobby for minutes. "I am someone who does not allow cruelty to continue unchecked," the newcomer said, their tone soft but authoritative. "You will not humiliate her. You will not treat her as if she is less than human. Do you understand me?" For a moment, the lobby seemed suspended in disbelief. Patrons stopped whispering, phones lowered, the air thick with tension. Even the host's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation and unease. He leaned slightly forward, voice edged with venom. "And what if I do?" "Who's going to stop me? You." The newcomer's eyes remained calm, unwavering. "Yes," they said simply, "I will." There was no threat in their words, no malice, only an unshakable certainty that radiated authority. It was a presence that did not demand respect, it commanded it. Nia felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from a glimmer of relief she hadn't dared to feel. For the first time, she realized that she was not entirely alone, that the humiliation, though intense, could be interrupted, and that someone who had the power to act had noticed her. She dared a glance at the figure, noticing the warmth in their eyes, a subtle reassurance that spoke louder than any words. The host, growing impatient and defensive, waved a dismissive hand. "You don't know what you're walking into. This is my space, my authority. Who are you to tell me how to conduct? I am someone who will ensure justice is served." The newcomer interrupted, firm now, eyes locked on the host with unflinching resolve. "You will stop this now, or I will see to it that the consequences for your behavior are immediate and severe." The host's jaw tightened, his confidence visibly cracking. He glanced around at the crowd, sensing the shift in energy. No one looked at him with amusement anymore. Curiosity and expectation replaced the earlier whispering. Even the previously indifferent bystanders seemed to sense that the balance of power had shifted. Nia, still trembling, felt a cautious hope stirring inside her. The oppressive weight of judgment was not gone, but for the first time she sensed a force that might lift it, a presence that could challenge the cruelty she faced. She took a small, tentative step forward, not wanting to intrude, but feeling that the tide had changed. The newcomer turned toward her briefly, their eyes softening. "You are safe," they said quietly, just for her. "You do not deserve this treatment. You have nothing to apologize for." Nia's voice trembled as she whispered, "Thank you, I—" The host, flustered and angry, interrupted sharply. "This is absurd. Who do you think you are? You have no right to interfere in my. You have no right to treat anyone like this," the newcomer said firmly, cutting him off. "Not her, not anyone. Your arrogance does not grant you moral authority." A tense silence fell over the room. The host, used to controlling every interaction with precision and intimidation, now faced an immovable force. He scowled, his usual sharp tongue faltering as he struggled to regain control. The crowd, sensing the shift, held their collective breath, watching the confrontation unfold. Nia felt her knees stop trembling, her chest easing slightly. For the first time in hours, perhaps for the first time in her life, she felt seen, supported, and valued. The oppressive weight of humiliation had not disappeared entirely, but it was no longer absolute. The newcomer's presence was a paradox, gentle and firm, compassionate and commanding. They did not need to raise their voice to make threats or to humiliate the host in return. Their authority was inherent, undeniable, and immediately evident to everyone in the room. The host, however, was still unaware of the full reality. He still did not know who this person was, what power they held, or why they had chosen this moment to intervene. And that ignorance, combined with his arrogance, would soon prove to be his undoing. For now, though, the lobby held its breath. Nia, still trembling, stood a little taller. The host, sensing his control slipping, attempted one last sneer, but it faltered under the unwavering gaze of the newcomer. And somewhere in the room, the atmosphere shifted, the first cracks appearing in the foundation of cruelty that had dominated the lobby moments before. The calm in the middle of the storm had arrived, and with it, the promise that change was possible, even in the face of relentless judgment, public humiliation, and despair. The lobby was silent now. Every whisper, every shuffle, every hushed breath of the crowd had ceased, as though the very air had been suspended by the tension in the room. Nia's trembling had not completely subsided, but she now stood with cautious hope, her eyes flicking between the host and the calm figure who had just intervened. The host's face contorted with disbelief and anger. "You think you can come in here and who even are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking under the pressure of his fading authority. He pointed a finger, trembling slightly, as if to assert some remnant of control. "You have no right to, this is my place." The newcomer's lips curved into a faint, controlled smile, their eyes steady, unwavering. "You're right," they said softly, almost conversationally. "This was your place until now." Their voice carried a calm certainty that made every listener lean forward, straining to catch each word. Nia's breath caught in her throat. Something in the air had shifted, an energy she couldn't yet define. The host's arrogance wavered under the weight of authority he couldn't see or understand. The newcomer's gaze swept over Nia and then back to the host. "You have no idea who I am," they said slowly, letting the suspense build, their voice slicing through the tension like a blade. "But perhaps it's time you learned." The host scoffed, his confidence flickering. "And what does it matter? Who you are changes nothing. I still control this environment. I still make the rules." His tone was sharp, defensive, but for the first time there was a tremor of doubt beneath it. The newcomer tilted their head slightly, a measured pause that seemed to stretch the air itself. "You think so?" they asked. Then, with a quiet authority that silenced the room, they added, "I am the owner of this establishment. I am also the CEO. Every decision, every policy you enforce, every word you think carries power, you've been abusing it under my name. And now it stops." The lobby seemed to freeze. Patrons blinked, some whispering, some gasping. The host's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that could no longer shield him. His authority, once absolute, crumbled under the revelation. "You," he stammered, voice rising in panic. "You're the owner, the CEO? Why didn't anyone?" "You didn't need anyone," the newcomer said firmly. "I've been observing. I've been informed of your behavior." Their eyes, calm yet piercing, locked on the host. "You humiliated someone who had done nothing wrong. You judged her for her appearance, her circumstances, her poverty. You treated a human being as if she were nothing more than an object of ridicule. Do you understand how serious this is?" Nia felt her knees weaken slightly, relief and disbelief coursing through her. She had endured the humiliation, the sneers, the laughter, the silence, and now the power that had been used against her had been taken from her antagonist in a single, devastating revelation. The host's mouth trembled. I didn't know, you didn't care to know," the CEO interrupted, voice calm but unyielding. "And that is the difference between you and me. I care, I see, and now you will face the consequences of your actions." The host turned red, sputtering, his arrogance collapsing into panic. The crowd, previously passive witnesses, leaned in, stunned and murmuring in disbelief. Phones were still raised, recording every second, but the laughter and judgment had disappeared, replaced by a collective recognition of the injustice that had been occurring in their midst. Nia, still trembling, whispered, I don't believe it, The CEO's gaze softened as they turned to her, kneeling slightly so their height matched hers. "You don't need to believe it," they said gently. "What matters is that you are safe now. You do not deserve what he said or did to you. You have shown courage, dignity, and resilience, and I see that. I see you." Tears streamed down Nia's cheeks, but this time they were different, not of humiliation, but of relief, disbelief, and the first true sense of being seen. She could barely find her voice, whispering, Thank you, I didn't think anyone would." "You are stronger than you know," the CEO said softly, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "And this is only the beginning. No one will ever treat you this way again." The host's authority had completely dissolved. His confidence shattered, his arrogance replaced by fear and humiliation. The CEO straightened, their gaze sweeping over the crowd and then back to the host. "Effective immediately," they said, voice clear and commanding. "You are no longer employed here. Your behavior is unacceptable and it will not be tolerated. You will face further review, and every action you took to humiliate or demean will be documented. There is no escape from accountability." The lobby erupted in whispers, some gasps, and a few tentative claps as the enormity of the moment sank in. Nia's trembling slowed as her relief deepened. The injustice that had weighed so heavily on her shoulders had been dismantled in a single, dramatic revelation. Nia could hardly process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Her humiliation, her fear, the endless questions of "why me?" that had haunted her since stepping into the lobby, they all began to fade, replaced by a profound sense of validation. Someone had not only seen her, but had acted decisively to protect her. The CEO turned fully toward her, their eyes warm and compassionate. "You have been through a lot today," they said, "but your courage brought you here, and now we will ensure that not only are you safe, but that you and your family will never have to fear such cruelty again." Nia's voice trembled, her lips barely forming the words. I don't know how to thank you, You don't have to thank me," the CEO said gently. "You only need to accept that this world can change for the better and that sometimes the right people appear at the right time. Today you have seen that, and tomorrow you will see it again." The lobby, once filled with tension and fear, now felt lighter. The crowd watched in stunned silence, witnessing the dramatic reversal of power, the fall of arrogance, and the rise of compassion and justice. The host, once commanding and cruel, now cowered under the gaze of authority he had never truly understood, powerless in the presence of someone who could hold him accountable. Nia's heart, still racing, finally began to calm. She realized, amidst the lingering awe, that the nightmare of humiliation had ended. The unseen force she had sensed earlier, the quiet authority in the room, was real, and it had intervened when she needed it most. The CEO looked at her one last time, softly but firmly. "Let's go. We have work to do, ensuring your family is safe, your mother gets her medicine, and your future is secured." Nia blinked back tears, disbelief mingling with hope. I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," the CEO said. "Your courage has already said everything that matters." And with that, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The power had shifted. The injustice had been revealed. And Nia, once alone, trembling and humiliated, now stood at the threshold of a life that could finally be safe, respected, and filled with the compassion she had been denied for so long. The host's confidence had evaporated completely. His face, once painted with arrogance and scorn, was now pale and twitching with panic. The CEO's presence left no room for negotiation, no loopholes for excuses. The patrons in the lobby, who had once watched in silence or amusement, now witnessed the full weight of accountability descending upon someone who had thrived on cruelty. "Effective immediately," the CEO repeated, voice steady and unyielding. "You are suspended pending a formal review. Your behavior toward this guest is not only unacceptable, it is grounds for termination. Your actions will be documented, and you will face professional and legal consequences for any further misconduct." The host's mouth opened, closed, and opened again, searching for a word, a protest, a defense, but none came. His arrogance had been dismantled piece by piece, and the certainty of justice pressed down with an inescapable weight. Around the room, murmurs grew louder. Some whispered about the audacity of his cruelty, others about the dramatic downfall unfolding before their eyes. The message was clear. No one, regardless of pride or position, could act with such cruelty without consequence. Nia, still trembling, felt a warmth of relief flood her chest. She had endured humiliation, judgment, and fear, but now she saw that justice was not merely an abstract concept. It was real, immediate, and tangible. Her mother's life, her family's safety, and her dignity were no longer in jeopardy. The storm that had raged against her now began to dissipate. The CEO turned fully toward her, their expression softening. "Nia," they said, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze, "today was just the beginning. I want to ensure that your mother gets the medication she needs immediately." They waved to an assistant, who quickly moved to make arrangements for the medicine to be delivered to Nia's home, along with other essentials her family required. Tears streamed freely now, but they were different, tears of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. I I don't know how to thank you," Nia whispered, voice breaking. I was so afraid, I didn't think anyone would care." "You don't need to thank me." the CEO said gently, placing a reassuring hand on hers. What you need to do is accept help and know that this moment is not the end, but the start of something new. Your courage brought you here, and now you will be supported, not just today, but for the long term. Nia's eyes widened as the reality of the words settled in. Long term. She asked softly, You mean my family, we won't struggle anymore. The CEO nodded, a calm smile on their face. Correct, we will ensure that you and your family are taken care of. You will have access to education, healthcare, housing, and financial security. You will not have to endure fear, hunger, or humiliation again. Your life is about to change, Nia, in ways you could not imagine. The assistant returned, carrying a sleek folder with documents, medical arrangements, and other necessary paperwork. Everything is being arranged, ma'am, the assistant said to Nia, bowing respectfully. Your mother's medicine will arrive today, and your family's immediate needs are covered. Long-term support is being set up as we speak. Nia's knees weakened slightly as the weight of the moment hit her. Her mother's life, her little brother's future, the security she had longed for so many years, was no longer a distant dream. She was standing on the threshold of a new life. She lowered herself into a chair, overwhelmed, as the CEO knelt beside her, radiating calm reassurance. I don't even know what to say, Nia whispered, her voice barely audible. All I know is thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for helping me, for believing I deserved help. The CEO smiled gently. You've done all the hard work, Nia. You showed courage, dignity, and resilience in the face of unbearable cruelty. Today you are being rewarded not because you asked, but because you endured, because you stood tall when so many would have fallen. Nia's tears fell freely now, but they were no longer tears of shame. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and healing. I don't know if I can ever repay this, she murmured, voice shaking. You don't need to, the CEO said, voice soft but firm. What matters is that you take this opportunity, that you care for your family, that you continue to be the person you've always been, resilient, compassionate, and strong. That is repayment enough. The CEO's assistant began coordinating logistics quietly in the background. Medical care for Nia's mother, immediate financial support for her household, and arrangements for education for her and her siblings. Every detail was handled with precision, as if anticipating the needs of someone who had been denied dignity for far too long. Nia watched, stunned, as a vision of her future began to take shape. For the first time in her life, she imagined a reality where fear did not dominate her choices, where judgment did not dictate her worth, and where her family could thrive without constant worry. Her heart, long burdened by responsibility and despair, felt lighter than it had in years. CEO looked at her with unwavering kindness. Nia, they said softly, your courage has already changed the course of your life. But remember this, compassion and justice are forces that can change the world. Today you experience both. Never forget what they feel like and never underestimate the power of standing up even when you are alone. Nia's lips trembled as she tried to speak. I will never forget, I promise. I'll do everything I can to honor this, to honor you and help others. That's all anyone can ask, the CEO said gently. Use this opportunity not only for yourself, but to lift others as well. That is how true change begins. The host, meanwhile, was escorted away by security. His face, once filled with smugness, was now a mask of disbelief and shame. He had miscalculated completely, unaware that cruelty carries consequences and that no amount of arrogance can withstand accountability when justice arrives. The room seemed lighter, freer, as if the tension of injustice had been physically lifted. Nia took a deep breath, finally allowing herself to absorb the moment fully. Her mother's life was saved, her family's future secured, and the cruel mockery that had once threatened to define her day was erased by the decisive intervention of someone who had not only authority, but compassion. For the first time, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace and hope. She was no longer alone. She had been seen, valued, and protected, and she understood that the world, despite its cruelties, could also hold moments of extraordinary grace. The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of a spacious home, warm and golden, filling the rooms with light. The aroma of breakfast cooking drifted through the air, a simple joy that Nia now had the privilege of enjoying without worry. She moved gracefully through the kitchen, her hands steady and confident, preparing meals for her family. Her younger brother, now older and taller, set the table with a grin, while her mother, looking healthier and stronger than she had in years, smiled at the bustling scene with quiet contentment. Nia paused for a moment, glancing out the window at the garden where her children played. The sight made her chest swell with gratitude. The streets she had once walked with bare feet, burdened with worry and exhaustion, seemed like a distant memory. She had been through hardships, humiliation, and despair, but those moments had been transformed into strength, opportunity, and purpose. Her journey from desperation to empowerment had not been simple. She remembered vividly the day she had entered that lobby, trembling, humiliated, and fearing the worst. She could still hear the echo of cruel laughter and the sting of judgment that had cut deeper than any hardship she had faced before. But she also remembered the calm presence that had appeared, the authority and compassion that had turned the tide in her favor. That day had changed everything. Now, years later, Nia had not only rebuilt her life, but had surpassed every expectation she had once dared to imagine. She had completed her education, earned certifications in healthcare, and started a small community center in her neighborhood to help other families who struggled as she once had. Her life was filled with purpose, and the pain she had endured had been transformed into empathy, guidance, and a desire to uplift others. Her mother, now fully recovered, often sat in the garden, her hands folded over her lap, watching Nia work tirelessly to provide not just for her own family, but for the children and families who came to her center. "Nia," she said softly one morning, her eyes shining, "you've turned our lives into something I could have never imagined. You've given us hope. More than hope, you've given us life." Nia smiled, a serene, confident smile. "We've given each other strength, Mama," she replied. "I only took the hand that was offered, and then I carried it forward." The memory of the lobby, the host, and the cruel humiliation was no longer a wound. It was a lesson etched into her heart. A lesson that injustice could be met with courage, that cruelty could be confronted with authority, and that compassion, when extended, had the power to transform lives entirely. In her community center, Nia often shared her story with young people, especially those who faced systemic challenges, prejudice, and despair. She wanted them to know that the world could be harsh, but that even in the darkest moments, hope could emerge in unexpected ways. "There will be times," she told them, voice firm yet warm, "when people judge you unfairly, when the world seems against you, when silence surrounds you. But remember this: courage, dignity, and perseverance can change everything. And sometimes the right people will appear to guide you through." Her children listened wide-eyed, inspired by the story of their mother's resilience. Her youngest, a little girl with curious eyes, asked one evening, "Mama, did someone help you that day?" Nia knelt down and brushed a stray curl from her daughter's face. "Yes, my love," she said softly. "Someone did, and one day I hope you will be that someone for another person who needs help." Outside, the neighborhood had transformed as well. Families who had struggled could now see tangible proof that life could improve, that kindness and accountability were not just ideals, but real forces capable of shaping destinies. Nia's center had become a beacon of hope, a safe place where children and parents alike could learn, heal, and envision a brighter future. Nia herself had grown in ways that went beyond material security. The humiliation she had faced, though searing, had ignited an inner strength that could not be broken. She had learned the value of standing tall, even when every instinct urged her to flee, and she had discovered the transformative power of both receiving and extending compassion. Her life had become a testament to resilience, to the profound difference one person could make when courage met opportunity. And as she watched her family laughing in the garden, she reflected on the moral that had guided her through every challenge since that fateful day. Humanity is measured not by wealth, appearance, or status, but by the kindness, integrity, and courage we bring into the lives of others. A single act of compassion, especially when wielded by someone in a position of power, can change the course of an entire life. And courage, even in the face of public judgment and humiliation, can illuminate the path toward justice and grace. Nia took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment and feeling the peace that had eluded her for so long. Then she opened them, smiling at her family and the bustling center, filled with children laughing, parents learning, and lives being rebuilt. The journey had been long, painful, and at times almost unbearable, but it had also been worth every tear, every struggle, and every moment of resilience. She turned to her assistant, who had been helping coordinate a community outreach program. "Let's make sure the new families arrive safely," she said, her voice calm, confident, and full of purpose. "And let's continue showing them that life can change, that justice can prevail, and that every one of us deserves compassion." The assistant nodded, and together they moved toward the day's work, embodying the change Nia had fought for and the hope she now shared with everyone she touched. Outside, the sun shone brighter than ever, a perfect mirror of the life Nia now lived. A life of courage, compassion, dignity, and opportunity. And so the story came full circle. From a moment of unimaginable humiliation and despair, Nia had risen, supported by an unseen force at the right time, guided by compassion and empowered by opportunity. She had rebuilt her life, lifted her family from despair, and transformed her pain into a source of hope for others. Humanity is revealed through courage and compassion. One act of empathy can change a life, and standing up with integrity, even in the face of cruelty, can illuminate a path toward justice and transformation. Nia smiled as she watched a child at her center hand a small toy to another child who had just arrived. The circle of kindness continued, growing with each passing day. Remember, no act of cruelty is too great to be countered by compassion, and no struggle is too heavy when hope meets courage. Life can change in the blink of an eye, and you can be the change someone needs. Share kindness, stand with integrity, and never ever underestimate the power of humanity. She waved gently, her smile radiating warmth and assurance. If you were moved by this story, share it with someone who needs hope today. Like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and transformation. Together, we can keep the light of compassion alive. The sun illuminating the thriving community center, children laughing in the background, and Nia standing tall. No longer a victim, but a beacon of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of compassion in action.